They never raise their voice. They don't call you out directly, but somehow after they speak, you feel smaller. It's a look, a laugh, a joke that leaves a mark. And for a second, just a second, you wonder if you're imagining it, but you're not. This is how disrespect works in the real world. Not through shouting matches or open insults, but through subtle digs designed to keep you quiet, uncertain and off balance. And the worst part? You smile, you play along, because speaking up feels risky, because deep down you're not sure if it's worth it. But your dignity? It's always worth it. And the truth is, these people, the ones who chip away at your self-respect, they're not operating by accident. They know exactly what they're doing. Today, I'll show you why. 6 reasons why some people feel the need to undermine you, and more importantly, how Stoic philosophy can teach you to rise above it all with calm, strength, and absolute clarity. No drama, no shouting, no revenge fantasies, just powerful tools that let you take back your peace and keep it. So if you're done letting others write the story of how you see yourself, subscribe, tap the bell, and let's get started. Reason 1. They sense weakness. Some people test boundaries the way predators test prey. They don't come crashing in. They creep. They study. They analyze every glance, every hesitation, every crack in your confidence. And the moment they sense uncertainty, the second they pick up that you're unsure of your own worth, they strike. Not with fists, with words. Words dressed up as jokes, casual remarks, or backhanded compliments. That's a bold idea for someone at your level. Don't worry, you'll catch up eventually. Little things, but they stick. And if you stay quiet, if you let it slide, they get bolder, they push further, because silence to them is permission. They don't stop on their own, they stop when you show them. I'm not the one you thought I was. I remember a time early in my career when I worked under a manager who had a sharp tongue. Not witty, cruel. The kind of cruelty that doesn't scream, it slices. In team meetings, he'd look straight at me and say things like, "Maybe this is a little advanced for you," or "We'll let you catch up later." Always with that smug little smile that told me it was a game to him. At first, I laughed because everyone else did. I told myself not to take it personally, but I did. And worse, I stayed silent. I told myself I was being mature, professional, composed. But every time I said nothing, the comments got sharper. The smirk got bigger, because he wasn't guessing, he was testing, seeing how much I'd tolerate. And I taught him exactly where the line was, by not drawing one. This is where Stoicism enters, not as cold detachment, but as powerful clarity. People think being Stoic means shutting down, being numb, not feeling anything. That's not Stoicism, that's denial. True Stoicism is knowing where your power lies. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. You cannot stop someone from making a rude comment. You cannot force someone to respect you, but you can choose how their words affect your inner world. You can choose whether they plant roots inside your mind, or bounce off like rain on armor. Your dignity is not in their hands. It lives where your self-respect does. And once you reclaim that space, they lose their power. Here's something most people won't say out loud. It might sting a little, but it's the truth. If you don't respect yourself, no one else will. That's not meant to blame you. It's meant to empower you, because the moment you tolerate humiliation, you unintentionally send a signal. Not that you're weak, not that you deserve it, but that you'll accept it. And people, consciously or not, pick up on that signal. Human beings are wired to understand power, hierarchy, and boundaries. It's part of our biology. It shows up in families, in boardrooms, in friend groups, even in subtle social interactions. Some people, especially those who feel insecure themselves, push others just to see where the line is. And if you haven't drawn one, they assume there isn't one. It's not always out of malice. Often it's simply because they see an opportunity and they take it. Not because you're lesser, but because you haven't yet made it clear where enough is. So they keep going, they keep jabbing, keep joking, keep making you question your worth in tiny, consistent ways. And that's why this moment matters. The moment when you decide to take it back. Here's what I've learned, and what I want you to really hear. Standing up for yourself doesn't always look like a fight. It's not about shouting, it's not about slamming your fist on the table or firing back with insults. Sometimes it's a quiet shift, a calm boundary, a silent refusal. It's choosing not to laugh when the joke is aimed at you. It's holding someone's gaze without flinching. It's letting the silence hang instead of filling it with nervous laughter. It's walking out of a room where you're not respected, without apology, without explanation. That's stoic strength, not cold, not robotic, but disciplined, controlled, intentional, powerful. Because when you protect your dignity, not through rage, but through clarity, people notice. Something shifts. The ones who used to test you hesitate. They back off, sometimes slowly, sometimes all at once. Because they're not looking for someone strong. They're looking for an easy target. And you're not that anymore. You don't owe anyone an explanation for why you value yourself. You don't need to justify your standards or defend your boundaries. You just have to hold them. And here's where it gets deeper, where Stoicism shows its full power. When you stand tall, not only do others begin to respect you, you begin to respect yourself. And that's the real prize. You start to feel stronger, not because the world has changed, but because you have. You begin to trust that you can face whatever comes, not by controlling the chaos, but by mastering your reaction to it. That's what Stoicism offers. Not a mask to hide your feelings, but the kind of armor that lets you walk through fire, upright, steady, and untouched. Reason 2, they want control. Let's go deeper, because disrespect isn't always about testing boundaries. Sometimes it's about domination. Some people use humiliation as a weapon, a way to control the room without ever raising their voice. It's an old tool, ancient even, quiet but devastating. They'll make the comment that cuts too deep, reveal something personal in front of others, throw a jab that lands hard and pretends it was just a joke. But make no mistake, what they're doing is deliberate. They're trying to shrink you, because if they can make you feel small, they get to feel big. That's the game, and it's ugly, because when someone humiliates you, especially in front of others, they're not just attacking your pride. They're going after something more sacred, your power, your voice, your dignity. They want you to freeze, to fumble, to second-guess yourself. Why? Because in that moment of hesitation, they gain control. But here's the part most people overlook. The ones who humiliate others, they're usually carrying their own brokenness. They feel powerless in their own life, maybe in their relationships, their career, their self-worth. And instead of confronting that pain, instead of doing the inner work, they go for the shortcut, make someone else feel weak, because it's easier to tear someone down than to build yourself up. That's not strength, that's avoidance wearing a mask. So when someone tries to control you through shame, remember this: it's not a reflection of your worth, it's a reflection of their emptiness. And that too is something Stoicism helps you see clearly. I remember working with a colleague who had this uncanny ability to put people in their place, but always with a laugh, as if the humor made it acceptable. You know the type. They toss a sarcastic remark in the middle of a meeting, and suddenly the room shifts. Uncomfortable chuckles filling the silence. One afternoon during a team meeting, I presented an idea I had spent weeks refining. I was proud of it, feeling ready to share something valuable. But before I could finish, she cut me off with a sarcastic comment, sharp, perfectly timed. It wasn't just what she said, it was the precision behind it. designed to make me doubt myself, to shake my confidence. And for a moment, just a moment, I did. I felt my face flush. My heart raced. I wanted to defend myself, to explain why my idea mattered, why I deserved to be there. But I didn't. Something inside me, call it instinct, or maybe something I had finally learned, told me that the worst thing I could do was to play by her rules. Because here's the truth, her power wasn't in the comment itself. Her power was in my reaction. If I believed the lies she was selling, that I wasn't good enough to speak, then she won. But if I refused to buy it, her words lost their grip. This is where Stoicism offers a powerful insight. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." What he meant was simple but profound. People will try to humiliate you. They'll say things meant to hurt you, sometimes openly, sometimes behind your back. You can't stop them from trying, but you can refuse to let them win. They don't control your mind unless you hand them the reins. When you realize this, when you stop believing the lies they feed you about your worth, their power evaporates. A person who refuses to believe in their own inferiority simply cannot be humiliated. And that's not because they fight back or shout louder. It's because they know who they are at their core. You can't tear down someone who builds their sense of self from the inside out. You can't silence someone who doesn't need the approval of a crowd to know their value. If there's one thing I want you to take away from this, let it be this. Humiliation only works when you let it. When you allow someone to convince you that you deserve it, but you don't. You never did. The people who rely on humiliation as a weapon reveal their own weaknesses through their actions. But you, through how you respond, show who you truly are. If you choose clarity over confusion, dignity over defensiveness, mastery over your own mind, watch how quickly they lose interest. You are not prey. You are not small. You are someone who cannot be controlled because you control yourself. That's the power Stoicism gives you. Not a shield to block hurtful words, but a mindset so strong and clear that those words pass through you like wind through open hands. There's nothing for them to hold on to when you refuse to give their words weight. Reason 3. They envy you now. This may be the hardest truth to accept, but it's one you need to hear. Sometimes people humiliate you not because you've done anything wrong, but because there's something deeply unsettled inside them. The very qualities that make you admirable, your strength, your character, your success, become the source of their discomfort. Picking up where we left off, once you recognize why people humiliate you, to mask their own envy, something inside you begins to shift. When you stand tall, carrying yourself with quiet confidence, or live by principles they abandoned long ago, it forces them to confront everything they lack. And instead of rising to meet that standard, they take the easier route. They tear you down, not to correct you, but to silence the uncomfortable reminder that they have stopped trying to grow. Psychologists call this malicious envy, a darker, far more destructive cousin of the envy we all experience at times. Emotional psychology studies reveal that malicious envy can trigger something known as schadenfreude, a perverse satisfaction derived from seeing someone you envy stumble or fall. They want to see you diminished because your presence and achievements make them feel smaller by comparison. But they won't admit this. Instead, they find subtle, and sometimes not so subtle, ways to belittle, undermine, or humiliate you in front of others. Not because they think you're weak, but precisely because they know you're not. Seneca understood this truth deeply when he wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more that is poor." A person can have everything and still live in poverty if their soul is starved for peace. So they strike at others, trying to feed their own emptiness. They humiliate the very qualities they secretly desire, Because it's easier to destroy a light than to kindle their own. Once you grasp this, something changes. The shame you once felt in those moments begins to dissolve. You stop thinking there's something wrong with you. You no longer carry their bitterness as your own burden. If anything, you start to feel pity, not in a condescending way, but with clear, calm understanding that they're battling demons you have no part in. Stoicism teaches us that while we cannot control what others do, we can control what those actions mean to us. So when someone tries to humiliate you out of envy, don't shrink. Don't make yourself smaller to soothe their discomfort. Stand exactly where you are, firmly rooted in who you are, because their inability to stand in your light is not your responsibility. It never was. If you found these insights helpful so far, drop a yes in the comments. Your voice matters, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. Reason 4, you haven't set boundaries. Now, let's talk about something that's easy to overlook but absolutely crucial. If you don't make it crystal clear what you will and won't accept, people will test your limits. Often it's not malicious at first. Pushing boundaries is wired into human nature. Sometimes consciously, sometimes unconsciously, people test to see where your line is. And if they don't find a line, they assume there isn't one. They keep pushing. Maybe a joke at your expense here, a casual disregard there. And because you stay silent, convincing yourself it's not worth the trouble, they keep going. Gradually, without even realizing it, they start to take up more and more space in your life. You look around one day and suddenly, the place you're standing no longer feels like yours. The unspoken rules you once assumed were obvious, like you deserve respect, your time matters, your feelings carry weight, have quietly slipped away. The relationship no longer honors these truths. Instead, disrespect has become the new normal. You might wonder, how did it get this far? The honest answer is that it started the moment you stopped speaking up. The moment you failed to say, enough is enough. This is exactly why Epictetus warned us. If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. It sounds harsh, but it speaks to a deeper truth many avoid. Setting boundaries often comes at a social cost. People might misunderstand you. They might label you as difficult, unkind, or arrogant, especially those who have grown comfortable benefiting from your silence. But if you truly want peace, you cannot have it both ways. You cannot seek approval and keep your peace. Stoicism teaches us something vital. Peace is not the absence of conflict, but the presence of discipline. Peace means knowing exactly where you stand and refusing to budge from that spot, even if it means standing alone. Look at Oprah Winfrey's story as a perfect example. Early in her career as a young reporter at a television station in Baltimore, she faced harsh criticism. Producers told her she was unfit for television. They criticized her appearance, her weight, even the way she spoke. Pressure mounted for her to conform, to change who she was in order to fit the mold they had decided was acceptable. It would have been so easy to bend, to become what they told her she should be. But Oprah drew a line. She refused to change her authentic self just to gain the approval of people who couldn't see her true worth. Eventually, she was fired from that news position. Some might have seen that as proof they were right, but Oprah did not. She understood what Epictetus was teaching us. Sometimes you have to be willing to be thought foolish, stubborn, or difficult. You have to risk rejection to hold true to your values. And we all know how her story ended. Oprah built an empire rooted in authenticity, empathy, and self-respect. She became one of the most respected and influential figures in the world. Not because she bent to fit into someone else's definition of worth, but because she stood firm when it mattered most. That, right there, is the essence of Stoicism. You don't set boundaries to win approval or be liked. You set boundaries because you respect yourself. And when you do, when you calmly and consistently hold those boundaries, people either learn to respect them or they leave. Either way, you win peace. But remember, it's not easy. It means being willing to be seen as foolish or difficult by people who only understand relationships built on silence and sacrifice. True dignity often comes with solitude, but it is a solitude that breeds strength, not weakness. And when you live from that place, when self-respect becomes your foundation, the world adjusts around you. Those who stay understand exactly where the line is, and those who cannot accept it are no longer your concern. Reason 5. They seek an audience. Humiliation rarely happens in private. It feeds off witnesses. The weak often gather a crowd, not for support, but as silent accomplices in their cruelty. They need an audience to give their actions weight, because without it, their power feels empty and meaningless. You've seen this happen. Maybe it was in a conference room when someone in charge decided to cut down a colleague, not for a mistake, but to remind everyone who held the authority. Or in school, when a group ganged up on a quiet kid, not because he was guilty of anything, but because he was an easy target. The one being humiliated isn't chosen because they're weak. They're chosen because they're alone. That's how bullies operate. They find those standing alone and test if they can make them kneel. And the crowd only makes it worse. There's an uncomfortable truth about human behavior. People in groups are easier to manipulate. Psychology calls this de-individuation, the process where people lose their sense of personal responsibility in a crowd. They will laugh when they don't want to laugh. They will stay silent when they should speak, because the fear of becoming the next target silences them. The one who leads the humiliation knows this and relies on it. Their cruelty becomes a kind of performance, using another person's shame to entertain those too frightened to step in. But what looks like power is actually weakness. A person who must rally others to their side to humiliate someone else is already showing you who they are. Someone who cannot stand on their own. Think of Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, one of the most powerful men in history, surrounded by senators, generals, and advisors who bowed in his presence. Yet Marcus was famous for his humility and restraint. He didn't humiliate or berate others to prove his power. In fact, he often reminded himself that the crowd's opinion was worthless if it came from those who lacked understanding. He wrote, "The opinion of 10,000 men is of no value if none of them know anything about the subject." Marcus Aurelius understood that crowd approval was fickle, hollow, and often driven by fear, not wisdom. True strength doesn't require a chorus of voices to validate it. There is a lesson here. When someone tries to humiliate you publicly, their greatest weapon isn't their words. It's the reaction of the crowd. They want you to feel isolated, to believe that the laughter or silence of others means you've lost. But their laughter is hollow. Their silence is fear. And you owe them nothing. No explanation, no defense, no piece of yourself. We've just talked about the power of resilience, standing tall even when surrounded by noise and cowardice. Now, let's dive deeper into another reason why people try to humiliate others. They sense you don't truly know your own worth. The Stoic path teaches you to stand with dignity even when surrounded by cowards, to be willing to walk alone rather than follow the crowd, because those who need an audience to feel powerful are never as strong as they pretend to be. And you don't need an audience to know your value. You don't need the approval of those who cheer only for the loudest voice. What you need is a steady mind, a clear sense of right and wrong, and the discipline to hold yourself upright when everything around you tries to make you fall. That's the heart of Stoicism. Real power lives not in applause or fear of others, but in the quiet, unshakable dignity of someone who refuses to be made small by the noise of the crowd. If what you've heard so far resonates with you, please like this video and subscribe. because every time I discover a new perspective on life, I want you to be the first to hear it. Reason 6, they sense you don't know your own worth. This is the deepest wound many carry quietly, the experience of being humiliated before truly understanding your value. This often happens early in life, or at moments when we feel most uncertain about who we are. Those who seek to humiliate have an instinct for this kind of weakness, but not the kind you might imagine. It's not physical or intellectual weakness. It's the weakness of someone who hasn't yet recognized their own value. Because if you truly knew who you were, if you were rooted in that, you wouldn't let anyone degrade you, not because they wouldn't try, but because their words wouldn't land. Insults, jokes, dismissals would bounce off something solid inside you. Without that sense of self, though, you become vulnerable to others' approval or disapproval. You bend in the wind of their opinions because you haven't yet chosen where to stand on your own. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." It's a line worth reading twice. Most people think freedom comes from circumstance, status, money, or reputation. But real freedom begins with self-mastery. And self-mastery starts with knowing who you are. When you don't know yourself, the world is full of threats. But when you do, you become untouchable, not because of arrogance, but because of quiet certainty. Consider Eleanor Roosevelt. As a young woman, she was painfully shy. She came from a powerful but deeply dysfunctional family. Her mother openly mocked her appearance, calling her Granny because she was seen as plain. She lost both parents before she was a teenager and was raised by people who never let her forget how small they thought she was. She could have spent her whole life carrying those humiliations, shrinking into the background as many expected. But she chose not to. Building on Eleanor Roosevelt's story, it's clear that real strength grows slowly, through education, through work, and through deeply understanding your own moral convictions. She crafted a sense of self that no one could ever take away from her. As First Lady, Eleanor faced harsh criticism, both in public and behind closed doors. People attacked her appearance, dismissed her opinions, and mocked her activism. Many felt threatened by a woman daring to step beyond the narrow role society had assigned her. But Eleanor had already done the toughest work. She had decided who she was. Because of that, no humiliation, no matter how loud or cruel, could stick. She stood firm and kept fighting for human rights, justice, and decency, not because others approved, but because she knew what was right. This is the core teaching of Stoicism. No one can humiliate you without your consent. Freedom, as Epictetus taught, is mastery over yourself. It's not won by battling every insult or trying to silence every critic. It's won by refusing to give anyone else power over how you see yourself. When you truly know your worth, insults become meaningless. They bounce off like harmless echoes. Jokes lose their sting, turning into nothing but empty noise. Even admiration can't sway you because your self-respect doesn't depend on anyone else's recognition. But this isn't easy. It demands effort. It calls for time spent reflecting honestly on who you are and what you stand for. It means being willing to stand alone even when no one else understands. There is no shortcut to true freedom. You cannot beg others to respect you. You must claim it quietly without asking permission. And when you do, something profound happens. The people who once tried to humiliate you lose interest. Their words no longer find a place to land. You become untouchable, not because the world around you has changed, but because you have. Here's the truth. People will try to humiliate you. Some will test you, some will envy you, and a few will do it simply because they can't handle your light. But here's the good news. You're not here to dim yourself for anyone, not anymore. You're not someone who begs for respect. You command it quietly, calmly, and if necessary, alone. That is the Stoic way. When you stand your ground and refuse to believe the lies meant to make you small. something powerful happens. You become untouchable, not because the world is kind, but because you are strong. So if you're ready to live with that quiet power, to rise above the noise, I invite you to take this journey with me. Hit subscribe, tap the bell, and join a community of Stoic Fantastic to stand tall, no matter who tries to pull them down. And remember, the world doesn't give you dignity, you give it to yourself. And that, my friend, is something no one can ever take away. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.